Welcome, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where everyone is, or perhaps even good evening. My name is Professor Dina Kiwan, and I've been Principal Investigator for the Disability Under Siege programme. I have a short presentation that I'm going to put up just to give a little bit of background to the overall programme before we head into what is our final conference of the programme. And we've been running since 2020 with some preparatory work even starting the year before. So we're a group of interdisciplinary scholars from a number of geographies of focus, including Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. On this screen, we have a map for those who can't see it, just showing those geographies of Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. And the challenge that our program was attempting to address is that in lower and middle income countries, 85% of children with disabilities never attend primary school. And so the vision of our program was to provide both intellectual and logistical resources, focusing on delivering a transformational impact for educational provision for children with disabilities. And our particular interest also was that this would be in areas of conflict. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we're an interdisciplinary group. That was our approach. This was to critically evaluate dominant discourses about disability. So typically disability is understood in quite medical ways of constructing. And so we wanted to critically evaluate and challenge those discourses. And also to look at individual and community attitudes towards disability in contexts of conflict as well. What was really important for us working as a group with scholars both in the global north and global south is that we co-produce in an equitable manner the multidisciplinary research to support evidence to inform education provision for those with disabilities in the Middle East. Also, what was very important to us is the focus on strengthening local capacity, both through through people, so supporting early career researchers, for example, and also ensuring that the research that we commissioned was actually carried out by those in the region who understand the context best and can set the priorities as well. And then also bleeding on from that was the importance for a legacy of developing ongoing relationships, both within the region and also between the region and also the UK as well. And that we hope will continue beyond the scope of our programme, as we come to the end of the programme. On the right side of the screen, there's a sort of a diagram that shows also in the centre, it's like a donut with gender equality in the centre, and then in the donut itself, several different sections. And these sections include education under occupation, public health and social action, literature and knowledge production, visual culture and participative arts, and migration, disability, and inclusive societies. Just to give you a sense of the range of disciplines and topics of expertise across the team. On this slide is a series of photos of all the Disability Under Siege programme investigators, and I'll just read them off. So in addition to myself, there's Dr. Nazmi Al-Masri from the Islamic University of Gaza, Professor Rita Giacoman from Birzeit University, West Bank, Dr. Maha Shoaib, from the Centre for Lebanese Studies in Lebanon and currently based as a visiting professor in Cambridge. Dr. Itab Shoaib, also from Centre for Lebanese Studies and also a visiting scholar at University of Cambridge. Professor Anthony Downey from Birmingham City University. Dr. Ruth Gilligan, also from University of Birmingham. Dr. Kate Woodcock, also University of Birmingham, and Dr. Sarah Benson, University of Birmingham in Dubai. And we had a number of co-investigator and also additional partner institutions. And on this slide, we have their logos. So in addition to the universities of our co-Is that I've mentioned previously, we had other partners, including Action on Armed Violence, a charity based in the UK, the Catan Foundation, an arts and cultural institution based in both London and the West Bank in Palestine, Al Ma'mal, Tami, and Idrak, part of Queen Rania Foundation. So that completes my brief presentation just to welcome you. And just to, before we go into the main presentations, just to remind you a little bit of some conference housekeeping. So firstly, there are channels for English and Arabic translation, should you need them. And the way you get to the channels is that you click, there's an icon of a globe, which you click, and then there's a choice of choosing English or Arabic. There's international sign language available throughout the conference. And there is closed captioning that is generated automatically through Zoom in English. The conference will be recorded and the sessions will be added to our website afterwards. So for those of you, obviously, we understand it's 2 full days of conferences. And so obviously you can dip in and out and then later catch up on any sessions that you were not able to attend that were of interest to you. We're using the same Zoom link for both days of the conference. And at the end of the presentations, there'll be opportunities for questions. But if you can use the Q&A function rather than the chat for those questions, and then I will be reviewing those questions to be able to put to the presenters. And the panel chairs also will be in their sessions doing the same thing. So not everybody is bilingual across all the chairs. So probably English language is, if you are able to put your questions in English, that would make it perhaps a little bit quicker, but it's not essential. So you're absolutely free, obviously, to write it in Arabic, and we will manage it across the team. Finally, this conference is dealing with sensitive issues, and we also want to acknowledge to everybody in the region our solidarity with what you have all been through in the last year. Please show respect for all speakers and participants, and any inappropriate behavior will not be accepted at the conference. And finally, links to the conference program in English and Arabic can be found in the chat. Apologies for that background noise. I will now hand over to our first keynote speaker. I'm delighted that she's with us, Dr. Laila Atshan, based in West Bank. Please, if we can, I don't know, is it time to spotlight Laila?
Yes, you can go ahead. Good morning. Hello.
Good morning, Laila. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to all. Thank you for inviting me to this conference at such a challenging time, and it's also challenging for me to do such a talk remotely, but it's better than nothing. So I'm going to try to address the impact of war on people with disability education, and we cannot separate education from other aspects. In my mind, Gaza is the closest example, and now what's happening in Jenin, and some contacts with people with disability from South Lebanon. But I'm sure people in Lebanon will address it closely. I want to start with thinking, because we don't really have accurate any statistics at this point. It's very chaotic, but war generally is mostly started by the most powerful, meaning those with resources, those with the power, and they are the least harmed, and the biggest losers are usually and mostly the most vulnerable. Of course, people with disabilities in such a war like Gaza, like South Lebanon, will be the most hurt, the most vulnerable people. And that I can think of elderly people, people who have difficulties in movement, or people who lack balance, etc. As we know, I want to start with a quotation, which I think is for Abdulrahman Munif, a Jordanian writer, who says, "The true victims have no voice. They die in silence, disappear in the midst of chaos of events, and are forgotten as if they never existed." And I'll continue. Trauma generally sets people back, sets them back in many ways. Their ambitions, if we think of the Maslow pyramid, people go back to survival mode. And in the case of Gaza, for example, definitely it's a survival mode, if not less somehow. And of course, people with disabilities, in most cases, will go behind all these people. I mean, even in well-functioning societies, it's a big struggle to have equity for people with disability. Can you imagine when people are running from one corner to the other, from one tent to the other? What happens to people who have, for example, mobility issues or sight issues, or cannot hearing issues, or mental health challenges, who just cannot make sense of what's happening now, as is the case in such wars. And one of the difficult things in today's wars is the complicated war equipment, which are done remotely, where in all cases, war doesn't see human beings. To do a war like what's happening now, you have to dehumanize people. And definitely, I think with the help of games, like technological games, and with the help of complex weapons, you don't see human stories. You just, everybody is a fair deal. And in behind this fair deal, there's so many sad stories and setbacks. I'm thinking of people, who are trying to move with people with disabilities. There's three scenarios I'm thinking of. In some cases, actually, I'll start with a positive note. Families have done very well because they have a disabled child or a disabled person in their families, where they moved ahead of time to a safer place, because they knew if things go very bad, they can't move with this person on a wheelchair or this person with other ability problems. That's one case. In some cases, families had to choose to be in an unsafe place because they cannot move the person with the disability, and they decided to either live all of them together and die all of them together. One sentence we hear a lot from Gaza is, let's stay together, so if we die together and we don't stay behind. And so you can imagine when there's someone with a disability, right? And there's a situation which sometimes happens in wars, which I have one example of, which is sad. A father had two disabled sons, had to take one son with a disability and leave the other son with his elderly father who couldn't move and escape. He had no choice but to escape with part of them and not all of them. And you can just imagine, I mean, as a therapist, I'm thinking, all these situations, what kind of feelings does this leave families with? The guilt they feel, the helplessness they feel, the abandonment the people who are vulnerable feel, but really people are left with no choice. Although if you look at Gaza, with all the challenges, people have really mobilized communities to try their best to save whoever they could save. But the situation has been almost impossible in many cases, as we know. If we think of education, I mean, if we think of education and the Maslow pyramid, unfortunately, it's put behind because, as we said, for the almost past year and a half, people have been just surviving to not starve, not die from starvation, find a safe place, and sorry, I lost my focus for a second. Yeah. It's been very difficult. Later in the war, some initiatives started for education in some tents. And I'm thinking of, I mean, people on wheelchair have really had a difficult time to reach these tents to receive education. I had quotations from a child who carried her Braille books, and as you know, Braille books are very heavy. She managed to carry them in the midst of chaos and in difficult roads, but could not reach because of security the tent where they provide some kind of education. And of course, with the lack of internet and the lack of technical possibilities, people with hearing problems who anyway have difficulties could not keep up with the small education initiatives. Maybe you know of the NGO called Faluna in Gaza. That has been a very successful program for people with hearing impairments, and now it's gone. So whatever has been established under all the difficulties since 2006, with all the constant bombings of Gaza, it's just gone now. So what will this mean? I mean, this really is just depriving so many people of opportunities that if they had them, we could have had genius people like we had in history with disabilities. I mean, these people, even when real peace starts, it's going to be bad enough and difficult enough for them to get the medical services, to take care of health issues, to get equipment, movement, mind you, education. So this will leave, unfortunately, many people with disabilities without education, without being prepared for life. My computer is talking. People with disabilities, audio settings button menu. Most people in wars actually live without much dignity in terms of hygiene, in terms of, you know, running. Like, I remember once I had to run from an area. I was doing a workshop and suddenly they started being shooting in Nablus. And I felt ashamed to have to run because I was doing consultancy with UNICEF. So I had to leave and leave people behind. And one feels a bit like a mouse, somehow escaping from one place to another. But you can just imagine how much more difficult it is for people with disability, really. What else can I think of? Yes. A child in Gaza, I don't know if I mentioned it, begged her family to leave. She said, "It's over, Mom, just please leave, and you can't move me, just escape." Imagine a child feeling so much like an adult having to ask her family to escape also. So how does this leave us? It leaves us with many challenges where we have to start from zero. We have to, we have to start thinking of projects that really think of people who are marginalized, those people who are silenced, who cannot really advocate much for themselves. I mean, in all the rehabilitation of places like Gaza, like now what's happening in Jenin, and who knows who's next, it's very important to highlight the human stories of people with disabilities. And even if they didn't make it for 2 years in terms of formal education, it's very important to create spaces and projects where people can have their opportunities. It's very important to provide mental health services for people with disabilities and their families, because I'm sure there's guilt on all ends for disabled people. I'm thinking of people with mental health issues like schizophrenia who really generally don't feel safe. And you can imagine how unsafe they were. I mean, how much rehabilitation do we need to really do? We need to think of details when we're thinking of rehabilitation of people. I think all efforts must be very inclusive now. And I think along with it, we need to be very keen on advocating, because it's so easy. It's people with power, people with money who can buy weapons, all this weaponry that's dehumanizing so many people. There needs to be so much advocacy to reduce such possibilities of just really random killing from a distance. And this is also dehumanizing not just the victims, it's dehumanizing people who commit such atrocities. I don't know what happens to their humanity. As you know, there's a popular video for a soldier watching with laughter a Down syndrome child being killed. I mean, when I think of it, I wonder what happened to this person's humanity. And to just see such a child and die and watch them with laughter just because they happen to coincidentally be born as Palestinians. I don't want to say much, but I just wanted to lay the ground for maybe a discussion, for questions, and then to continue with this subject.
Thank you very much, Laila, for your illuminating reflections. I wonder if I can sort of take the opportunity as chair to ask you a question and maybe just get the ball rolling with other people.
Sure.
You know, as well as you being a therapist, a psychologist, you know, you're also a disability
Right.
activist, disability rights advocate. And I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about your personal story and what led you to becoming a disability rights advocate, and if there's anything you want to kind of highlight or share there in terms of
Sure.
what drew you in and what the challenges have been or the opportunities.
Sure. Actually, I come from a family who are refugees of 1948. My parents fled a village near Jaffa called Al Hadithe with my oldest brother, who also happened to be blind. He was 2 months old then. And so they had to start life from zero in Ramallah. And of course, my mother and my parents, my parents made 10 kids, of which 3 were blind, me and a sister and a brother. And a Quaker neighbor of ours, bless her soul, she died, convinced my mom to send me and my sister to a boarding school in Jerusalem. So this is also a good question, because I mean, growing up in a boarding school and going home occasionally was very difficult. As a child, how I interpreted was that my family rejected me. But now, as an adult, I think thanks to Ellen, who convinced my mom to send me to a boarding school, because my mom, who died 3 years ago, was definitely a traumatized woman, a very traumatized woman. And I could see the intergenerational trauma she gave my siblings. I think me and my sister had it a bit less, the trauma, because we were living in a boarding school. We found our space with less of the messages that a traumatized parent can give, like be careful, don't trust, we cannot, it's not safe, you know. People live. My mother died at the age of 93, 94, and she was an amazing, amazing woman, never went to school, but still was very cautious and very gave many protective messages to my siblings, which can easily hinder people's possibilities. And I think that space in the boarding school and that feeling I had in the boarding school gave me the motive to be who I am today and insist to continue education and to be an advocate of all vulnerable people, whether they're disabled people, people who come from poorer backgrounds, refugees, because I know what it did to my refugee family, and I know what could have happened to us if we didn't live in a neighborhood eventually that was very supportive to us. So this is a bit of my background. But I can assure you that war, like I told many people, this war in Gaza will affect 5 or 6 generations, which is why we really need so much healing. And I'm not talking just about, when we speak about education, it's not just concepts and academic education. It's awareness, it's healing, it's empowering people to move on healthily, really.
Thank you very much, Laila, for sharing that. I'll now open the floor. I'm just seeing if we have a question. So we have a question from Haytham saying, what percentage of pre-university students in Palestine are known or estimated to be disabled, and what percentage of these make it to university? I'll put that over to you, Laila. I'm not sure if you have statistics at your fingertips, but it could also, I mean, it's also, I think, you know, having been through the last year, there are so many more disabled people now. So whatever it was, it's so much higher now. So I just wonder what thoughts you have on that, Laila.
You know, statistics is not my greatest strength, but for example, growing up in the boarding school, very, very, very few kids made it in life beyond high school or even to high school. I mean, now there's more awareness, but there's more wars, which is also a setback. So I'm really not sure about this number. I have a statistics person here in front of me. Samir, how many disabled people make it to college, you think?
I mean, first thing you need to look at is schooling. And, you know, in Gaza Strip, 45% of children are out of school, who have disabilities are out of school. And then that's about 30% in the West Bank.
You hear that? 45% of Gaza kids with disabilities don't finish school, and 30% in the West Bank don't finish school. We don't know how accurate now with the mess in Palestine in general, but estimate so.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question from Ayman. It says, how is the occupation uses the concept of disability politically to oppress and impede the lives of Palestinians?
The occupation use disability?
To politically oppress and impede the life of Palestinians. So I'm interpreting that as, you know, how is disability used, you know, as a weapon? You know, disabling, how is disabling used as a weapon?
I mean, just increasing the number of disabilities with such limited resources. If we think of Gaza, which has been under constant airstrikes and bombings since 2006, the setbacks, there's always a regression, right? There's always a regression, which means missed opportunities, which means more helplessness, which means less success, less empowerment. And you don't know somehow why and how, but a few make it under such conditions. And with this war, I'm not even daring to come near it and imagine how is this going to be resolved. Plus, also, if you think of the West Bank, I mean, many people to move between cities now. I'm in Ramallah, which is a bit of a bubble, but to leave Ramallah doesn't feel safe. And in many roads, people have to go and walk in a dirty road, which is impossible, for example, for a person on a wheelchair or a blind person alone. I remember I was coming from the borders once and it was very unsafe. And the driver had to go through mountains and valleys. And fortunately, another guy came in the car. I felt so unsafe, not knowing really where the hell I am, right? So it's all, if we think human inclusivity, it's so hindering, it's so frightening. And trauma creates fear, creates helplessness, creates, confiscates opportunities. Yeah.
Thank you, Laila. We also have another question from Sabine, who is saying if thank you for the intervention. I was wondering if you can share your thoughts on what needs to be done right now during the rebuilding process in Gaza, especially when it comes to education of people with disabilities.
I think right now it's very important to have a clear as possible of an assessment for people who became disabled and their needs. And of course, usually we have to start with the basic needs. Like I worked with youth who were injured during the 2 intifadas in Palestine. And first, I can only imagine people with amputation, with all kinds of disability, they need that kind of help, medical help. And then to plan for projects where to empower people. And I think along every educational project for people with disabilities that needs to be done, there has to be healing, not just for the people with disabilities, also for their families. Because it, as we know, this kind of stress and trauma impacts relations in general, societal relations. I'm sure in Gaza there was, for example, a lot of community support, but there were many people who took advantage, like we call them war merchants, who just want to make the best benefit out of war. So there needs to be monitoring to make sure with every rehabilitation done to Gaza that people with disabilities are included, and senior citizens who I'm sure, I mean, I can imagine the few left from 1948 who are alive in Gaza. I can imagine the impact of trauma, for example, on them now.
Thank you, Laila. We have a raised hand in the audience, Qusay Hussain. So yes, please go ahead with your question.
Hello, thank you so much for giving me the floor to speak with Dr. Laila. Dr. Laila, she's a friend of mine from Jordan, and then actually, you all make me early waking up at 3 o'clock a.m. from Texas. So to hear your conference, and thank you for a beautiful conference. So I'm a psychologist, a social worker, and working in the University of Texas, also advocate for people with disability. So my question to Dr. Laila, great to hear your voice. My question to you, Doctor, like, you know, a trauma war, it takes a time to heal. So with everything is going on right now with Gaza, and a lot of people got injured. So how do you think, like, first we need work with like the trauma, as you mentioned, and then, you know, the trauma take a time. So what the best way to both can work with both, with the trauma, also like rehab to make them be independent again?
I mean, Kusai, you are a great example of someone who I would say almost healed a very difficult trauma, right? We can say. And I think community support is very important, healing as in therapeutic sessions, and to find the strengths of the person. I mean, Kusai is an example. I know I have permission to say Kusai lost his vision as a result of landmine playing football. I met Kusai many years ago. And I think, Kusai, you're the best person to speak. What helped you succeed amazingly the way you succeeded? I think you need people to believe in you, find your strengths, and really give you a hand also. And some people have all this but cannot manage. But Kusai has been an amazing example who really made it with the opportunities you had. If you want to share 2 tips of what helped you, maybe that could be useful, right?
Well, thank you, Dr. Laila. What, in my opinion, is that unfortunately our society in Middle East, not all of them, but most of the country, they have stigma about people with disability. So first, we need to work on culture to how to adapt. So how they can give opportunity for people with disability and let them thrive. And I think I got lucky by meeting you, Dr. Laila, which you extend your hand and told me go and see the world. But if I return back to Iraq in 2012 or 2011 when we met, probably I didn't achieve where I am right now. Working with Doctor Without Borders and being in the Doctor Without Borders of the board of directors, and also finishing my doctoral and not letting my disability stop me what I want to achieve. So also like people like you who encouraged me, who didn't say, "Oh, you're not able, not capable." You said, "No, you're able and go." So I think the people around the people with disability is very important to know their ability, because, in my opinion, no one know your ability more than yourself. So don't estimate people ability. And don't assume, because assuming could demolish people. So always let the people who have disability to thrive, and don't tell them you cannot, because they are able.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kusai. We have another question in the chat that's asking about literacy rates in Palestine. This is from Celine. And she says that she knows that literacy rates in Palestine are one of the highest in the world. And is this also the case for people with disabilities, or is that different? And sort of related to that is, are universities inclusive for students with disabilities?
As far as statistics, again, I'm not the best, but I imagine with what's happening now in Gaza and in Jenin, unless we really do very, very sincere medication programs, literacy will go down. And for sure, proportionately, people with disabilities will also reduce. The literacy rates will reduce. That's why we really need very global and local, sincere efforts to use all the resources we can have, really.
Thank you, Laila.
I mean, to me, it's really amazing that many teachers, just out of their own goodwill, under all the bombing in Gaza, decided to just go to the tents where there's children and educate, even if they don't get exactly the certificate. And I have to say also the Ministry of Education in Palestine tried with many challenges to provide online education.
Laila, I think your computer's talking again.
It's talking, you can hear it?
Yes. I have another question. It's quite a specific question from Musa. It's about if you know of it, about the role of the Bethlehem Center for People with Disability, asking about their work. Laila, I think you're on mute.
Okay, I think I'm good now. Can you repeat your question?
It's quite a specific question. It was just wondering if you could say any more, if you know of the work of the Bethlehem Center for People with Disabilities.
The center in Bethlehem?
Yeah, so maybe we can broaden the question in terms of the resources in general. So what sorts of centers or initiatives are there? Yeah, and what are the sorts of achievements or challenges that different centers, yeah, if you could just give a flavor of that, for example.
Okay, I think when Shada Abu Sroor Stern comes, she will be smarter at this. I've been working in the past almost 5 years with UNICEF as a staff counselor, but I've been very involved with Palestinian community and its issues for many years now. However, I think the issue of disability, in spite of the constant problems, political problems and aggression we're having here, I think the political status gave the issue of disability a boost, where people with disabilities opportunities increased, more attention was given to this issue. But I'm always worried about what will this setback do? Like in places where it's very difficult between villages and people going to schools, I don't know how people will do. Like when I was working with one of the injured young people who was physically disabled, he literally rode a donkey for 2 hours to go to school every day. But now there's that, you can just imagine, and now the roads are really not very safe and not very accessible. There's clearly focus on destroying the infrastructure of roads, even also in the West Bank. So to ask Shada Abu Sroor, who probably knows a little bit better in the past 5 years about such services. What I wanted to highlight is what's behind the scenes of mental health, the hindering factors behind people's possibilities for education, whether it's vocational or academic, and how we need to just pay attention to it to really reduce the negative effect of it.
Thank you very much, Laila. I have another question here. Well, actually, it's more of a comment, but I'll share it with you. This is from Samira Ayad saying, as a Palestinian living in the West Bank and as an activist, an active member of the disabled community, where I work as the Director General of the Department of Disabled Persons in the Ministry of Social Development for more than 10 years, we were suffering and are still suffering from the inability to provide the needs of disabled people in terms of support tools. Currently, the needs of disabled people, especially after the war on Gaza, are important needs. I hope that we will hear through the conference how to work on providing services and special needs in this category.
I hope so. In my experience, when the trauma is overwhelming, people feel like whatever we do is useless. I mean, often I'm asked, and people start putting less effort. Some people do much more effort and some start giving up. And this is what I want to ask everyone who's hearing this, to never give up. Every effort is worthwhile, I think. And I am a very strong believer in lighting the candle is better than cursing the dark. But often, even as therapists, people who work with massive traumas say, what's the use? I've been helping people heal, and now there's another destruction. It's all useless. No, it's not useless. Many people ask me, how come you keep going? Because I believe if somebody didn't believe in me continuously all the time in my life, I wouldn't have been here. And if I weren't here, I wouldn't have helped the many beautiful people I managed to support in my life. So we need to reach out, ask for help, whatever position we're in. We need to keep trying, and you never know which door we knock will open, because if 5 doors don't open, one will eventually open. So I really want to leave us with hope and with keep trying. This is really my main message to everyone who's working in this field.
Thank you very much, Laila. We're hugely appreciative of you giving of your time and your reflections and insights. We have another question, someone who's putting their hand up, who I'll give the floor. It's Hanan Hasboun.
Hi, my name is Hanan Hasboun. I'm from Birmingham University, doctor in the nursing faculty. I had worked with Kanawati, Rima Kanawati, as far as being from the same country, city, Bethlehem. Her work has been extensive all around the world, especially because she has been blind and had worked a lot to improve the disability of a lot of people with sensory disabilities. We lost her when she died last year, but I think we need more people to be willing to advocate for people with sensory deficit as far as vision, hearing, and musculoskeletal loss of extremities. So that's what I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Wallahi, Hanan, thank you for mentioning Rima, bless her soul.
Somebody on the
Yes. Yes.
I think
Yeah.
I think Hanan, you're on mute.
I was mentioning that Rima and myself were a student at Birmingham University in the 80s. She was the person who had worked a lot with what's it called? With the sensory deficit people, eye and ear. We lost her last year. So that's what I wanted to say. And we had somebody in question and answer ask if anybody knows Rima Kanawati.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Hanan.
Thank you very much.
I think we probably have time maybe just for one more question. And that's from Dr. Jumna Oda.
Jumana.
Yes, please go ahead. You're on mute.
Jumana.
Do you hear me? Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank Laila with her very positive and hopeful spirit. And I know Laila, when she helped so many kids and adolescents and people in the Bethlehem area, and as she mentioned, first and second Intifada, and in Gaza, we work together. I'm from the Palestinian Habitat Center. We serve children with disabilities. We are based in Ramallah anyway. And of course, Rima Kanawati, who doesn't know her? She was an icon, Palestinian one, a Palestinian icon. And Laila, I always love with what she's very practical. She has beautiful experience. And I think her students or people who are trained by Laila can be an asset, or they are an asset for Palestinian community and elsewhere, also in the Arab world and elsewhere. And we wait for Laila to help as much as she can in Gaza those days. We need her really. And of course, thanks for the conference. I'm enjoying discussing these issues because they are really, really important, especially at this time for Palestinians, Lebanese, Gaza people in particular, and of course, Jenin and the north part of the West Bank. Thank you.
Jumana, thank you. Jumana and I did beautiful work together. And it's always amazing. It's never a waste of time to work with people who believe in an issue, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes left. I'm seeing a few more questions in the chat. So we have a comment from Mahashai, one of our co-Is, and she's raising the issue of how we sometimes she says, my concern is we are presenting disability as an individual issue, not a collective. So this is also a disciplinary issue. I think when one approaches disability from a psychological perspective, obviously the focus is on the individual and getting the individual through trauma. And of course, that's critical. But if we think of what is distinctive about the context, so the sociology of the context of Palestine in conflict, under occupation, I guess Maha is questioning how do we keep these two things in mind, or how does the one affect the other?
I think we need to work on all levels. And in my experience also, when people with disabilities or with trauma, for example, as a therapist, if I work with people collectively as groups, it's very empowering. And instead of being ashamed or embarrassed about who they are, sometimes we manage to make fun of ourselves and find solutions. And of course, we cannot separate people with disabilities issues from the general context of traumatized population. But I think because it's usually in the back burner, it's very important to highlight it in Lebanon or in Palestine or in Jordan in marginalized areas, to just keep an eye on people who could be amazing potential, like Steve the scientist, or so many people who made it. I mean, I discovered that so many famous people in history had some kind of a disability, whether ADHD, whether it's cerebral palsy, whether it's so many things. So the more we do sincere work collectively, the less missed opportunities, the more achievement we will do.
Thank you very much, Laila. I'm conscious of time, and although there are more questions, I think we had better close this session for the time being.